What happens when the Queen of Funk, a woman whose voice has defined an entire genre of music, who has been belting out hits since before most of the audience was born, sits down for what should be a celebration of her legendary career, only to have her struggles and her authenticity questioned by a host who seems determined to tear down everything she's built. What you're about to witness is one of the most explosive confrontations ever captured on daytime television. The moment when Chaka Khan, the 10-time Grammy winner who gave us I'm Every Woman and Ain't Nobody, reminded the world that the fire in her voice comes from a fire in her soul that nobody can extinguish. The studio went dead silent. The audience held their breath, and Joy Behar discovered that some queens don't tolerate disrespect, especially not from someone who has never walked in their shoes. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments because trust me, you're going to want to talk about this one. The morning had started with genuine excitement at the View Studios. Chaka Khan was coming on the show, and everyone from the producers to the makeup artists was looking forward to it. At 71 years old, Chaka remained one of the most respected voices in music history. A woman whose career had spanned 5 decades and influenced countless artists across every genre. She had recently been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a long-overdue recognition of her immense contribution to American music. Chaka arrived at the studio with the regal bearing that had always been her trademark. Her signature wild hair was styled magnificently, and her presence seemed to fill every room she entered. She greeted the production staff warmly, taking time to compliment the young people working behind the scenes, remembering what it was like to be underestimated and overlooked. This was who Chaka Khan had always been, a woman who never forgot where she came from. In the green room, her team reviewed the standard talking points about her recent induction, her new music, her continued touring. Chaka listened with half an ear, more interested in the energy of the place than the logistics of the interview. She had been doing this for 50 years. She knew how to handle a talk show. What nobody anticipated was that Joy Behar had arrived at the studio that morning with an agenda that had nothing to do with celebrating a legend. The studio lights were warm as Chaka took her seat at the famous table. She greeted each host with genuine warmth, her famous smile lighting up the space. The audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes, and she accepted it with the gracious humility of someone who had learned that fame was a gift, not a right. Whoopi Goldberg opened the segment with obvious reverence. Our next guest is a true living legend. 10 Grammy Awards, countless hits that have become part of the American songbook, and a voice that has inspired generations of artists. Please welcome the incomparable Chaka Khan. The applause continued as Chaka settled into her chair with practiced elegance. Thank you so much, babies. What a beautiful welcome. I feel the love in this room, and I appreciate every single one of you. Sarah Haynes asked about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, and Chaka spoke movingly about what it meant to finally receive that recognition after decades of being overlooked. She talked about the artists who had influenced her, about the long road from Chicago's South Side to the heights of musical achievement, about her gratitude for a career that had allowed her to touch so many lives. You know, when I started singing with Rufus back in the 70s, nobody told us we were making history, Chaka said, her voice carrying that distinctive warmth that had made her famous. We were just some kids from Chicago trying to make music that felt real, that came from our souls. We didn't have the internet telling us what was popular. We didn't have algorithms deciding what people should hear. We just had our instruments and our voices and our hearts. And now, 50 years later, to be recognized alongside the artists I grew up admiring, artists who changed my life with their music. It's overwhelming. It really is. The audience was captivated. This was the Chaka Khan they had come to see. Humble despite her monumental achievements, grateful despite the struggles she had endured, still burning with the same passion that had defined her entire remarkable career. For a few minutes, everything felt exactly as it should, like a proper celebration of a true legend. Then Joy Behar leaned forward with that familiar edge in her voice, and the atmosphere in the studio shifted dramatically. So, Chaka, Joy began, her tone carrying an unmistakable sharpness that made the other hosts exchange nervous glances. You talk about making history and being recognized. But let's be honest here. Your career hasn't exactly been a smooth ride. Has it? The drug problems, the rehab stints, the years when you basically disappeared from the scene. Don't you think the Hall of Fame honor is as much about nostalgia as actual achievement? The question landed like a bomb. The audience went silent. The other hosts looked stunned by the hostility of the question. Chaka's expression flickered, but her voice remained steady when she responded. Joy, I've never hidden from my past. I've been very open about my struggles with addiction, but those struggles don't define my career. What defines my career is the music I've made, the lives I've touched, the artists I've influenced. The Hall of Fame doesn't induct people based on nostalgia. They induct people based on impact. Joy wasn't satisfied. But that's just it. Isn't it? Your biggest hits were in the 70s and 80s. I'm Every Woman. Ain't Nobody. I Feel For You. That was 40, 50 years ago. What have you done lately that justifies all the celebration? The accusation was stunning in its dismissiveness. Several audience members shifted uncomfortably. Sunny Holston looked like she wanted to intervene immediately. What have I done lately? Chaka's voice dropped to something quieter but more intense. I've been touring the world, selling out venues on every continent. I've been recording new music that connects with audiences across generations. I've been mentoring young artists who want to learn from someone who's actually done it. And I've been staying alive. Joy, staying sober, staying relevant. At 71 years old, that's an achievement in itself in this industry. Joy pressed on with what seemed like deliberate cruelty. But let's talk about I'm Every Woman for a moment. That song became even more famous when Whitney Houston covered it. Some people might say that Whitney's version is the one that really matters, that she took your song and made it better. How does that feel to be overshadowed by someone who came after you? The mention of Whitney Houston seemed to strike something deep. Chaka's eyes flashed with an emotion that the audience couldn't quite read. Whitney Houston was my sister, Chaka said, her voice carrying a weight of emotion. I loved her. I still love her. And yes, her version of that song was beautiful. But let me tell you something about that song, Joy. I recorded I'm Every Woman in 1978. It was an anthem for women at a time when women needed anthems. Whitney's version came 15 years later, and it introduced the song to a new generation. That's not being overshadowed. That's called having a legacy. She leaned forward, her intensity filling the space. And for the record, before she passed, Whitney always credited me. She always acknowledged where that song came from. She never tried to erase me. That's what real artists do. They honor each other. They lift each other up. Maybe that's something you don't understand because you've never created anything that lasted. The counterattack was sharp and landed with precision. Joy's face reened, but she wasn't backing down. I'm just asking the questions that some people might be thinking. You've had a lot of drama in your life. The marriages, the feuds, the years when the drugs were clearly affecting your performances. Don't you ever look back and wish you had done things differently? Chaka sat very still for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 5 decades of living, struggling, and surviving. Drama? You want to talk about drama, Joy? Let me tell you about drama. Drama is growing up black and female in America in the 60s. Drama is fighting your way into an industry that didn't want you, that didn't believe a dark-skinned girl from Chicago could be a star. Drama is being told your voice was too powerful, too raw, too much for mainstream audiences. Her voice was rising now, but it wasn't anger. It was something deeper, something that had been refined through decades of experience. Drama is watching friends die from the same disease that was killing you and finding the strength to get clean anyway. Drama is losing people you love and still having to get on stage and sing about joy and love and survival. That's my drama, Joy, and I've lived every moment of it out loud without apology, without hiding behind false images. The studio had gone completely silent. The audience was witnessing something they hadn't expected. A woman laying bare her soul in response to attacks that deserved nothing but contempt. You asked if I wish I had done things differently. Let me tell you something. Every mistake I've made, every fall I've taken, every moment I've been down, it all went into the music. It all went into the voice you hear on those records. You don't get the power in my voice without the pain that shaped it. You don't get the joy without knowing the sorrow. That's what makes real music joy, not perfection. Authenticity. Joy tried to regain control of the conversation. I understand that, but surely you can see how your struggles have affected your reputation. There are people who remember the difficult performances, the erratic behavior, the years when you seem to be struggling publicly. Don't you think that's overshadowed your achievements? Chaka's laugh was short and carried decades of experience dealing with people who tried to diminish her. Overshadowed my achievements. Baby, I have 10 Grammy Awards. 10. I've sold millions of records around the world. I've influenced artists from Beyoncé to Adele to Mary J. Blige. Every female R&B singer working today owes something to what I did in the 70s and 80s. That's not overshadowed by anything. That's a legacy that will outlive both of us. She stood up and the movement commanded immediate attention. Despite her 71 years, there was something powerful about her presence, something that filled the entire studio. You want to know what I think this is really about, Joy? I think you don't understand artists. I think you don't understand what it takes to bare your soul for strangers night after night, year after year, decade after decade. I think you look at someone like me and you see the struggles, the imperfections, the human being behind the legend, and that makes you uncomfortable. Her voice rose with a passion that reminded everyone exactly why she had been called the Queen of Funk. Because here's the truth about my life. Yes, I struggled with addiction. I went to rehab. I did the work. I got clean. Yes, I've had failed relationships. I've had my heart broken. I've made mistakes in love. Yes, I've had feuds with people in this industry. I've stood up for myself when others wanted me to be quiet and grateful. But through all of it, I kept singing. I kept creating. I kept showing up. She pointed at Joy, her finger steady and accusing. What have you done through your struggles, Joy? You sit at this table every day and you pass judgment on people who actually do things. You comment on lives you've never lived, on art you've never created, on struggles you've never faced. And when someone like me sits across from you, someone who has actually lived a full, complicated, messy, beautiful life, all you can do is try to tear them down. The accusation landed with devastating accuracy. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Chaka wasn't finished. Let me tell you something about being every woman. That song wasn't just a title. It was a statement. I am every woman because I've been through everything. I've been poor and I've been rich. I've been celebrated and I've been forgotten. I've been addicted and I've been sober. I've been loved and I've been alone. And through all of it, I've never stopped being exactly who I am. She turned to address the audience directly and her voice softened to something more intimate. To every woman watching this who has ever been made to feel ashamed of her struggles, who has ever been told that her past disqualifies her from being celebrated, who has ever been reduced to her worst moments by people who don't understand what she's overcome. I want you to know something. Your struggles are not your shame. They are your strength. Every fall you've taken has taught you how to rise. Every heartbreak has deepened your capacity to love. Every mistake has given you wisdom that perfection could never provide. She looked back at Joy and her expression carried something that might have been compassion mixed with disappointment. I've been singing for 50 years, Joy. I've been told I was too much and not enough. I've been praised and criticized and written off and rediscovered more times than I can count. And through all of it, I've learned one thing. The people who try to diminish you are almost always running from something in themselves. They need you to be less than you are so they can feel better about who they're not. She gathered herself with the dignity of a queen, which is exactly what she was. I came here today to celebrate being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Instead, I've spent 15 minutes defending my entire existence to someone who seems to think that having lived a full life is something to be ashamed of. Well, I'm not ashamed. I'm proud. Proud of every song I've sung, every stage I've stood on, every tear I've shed, and every moment I've survived. She straightened her outfit with deliberate grace. You know what the difference is between you and me, Joy? When I leave the studio, I'm going to get on a stage tonight and sing for thousands of people who love me, people who have grown up with my music, who have fallen in love to my songs, who have cried and laughed and healed with my voice in their ears. That's my legacy. That's what I've built with my messy, complicated, beautiful life. Her voice dropped to something quieter, but somehow more powerful. What will you leave behind, Joy? What will people remember about you when you're gone? The jokes at other people's expense, the gotcha questions designed to humiliate, the moral superiority from someone who has never risked anything to create something lasting. The studio was absolutely silent. Joy sat frozen, clearly not expecting the interview to turn into such a thorough dismantling of her approach. Chaka looked at the audience one final time. I want to thank everyone who has supported my music over the years. You are the reason I'm still here. You are the reason I got clean. You are the reason I keep singing even when my body tells me to rest. I do it for you, and I do it for the little girl from Chicago who dreamed of being heard. She made it. We made it. And no one can take that away. She turned and began to walk off the stage, then stopped and looked back at Joy. One more thing through the fire. That song was about surviving, about going through the worst life can throw at you and coming out the other side still standing. I've been through the fire, Joy, many times, and I'm still here, still singing, still living out loud. Maybe someday you'll understand what that means. Maybe someday you'll have the courage to go through your own fire instead of watching other people burn from the safety of your comfortable chair. With that, Chaka Khan walked off the stage with the same regal bearing that had defined her entire career. The audience erupted into applause that seemed to shake the building, rising to their feet in a standing ovation that was clearly directed at the woman who had just demonstrated what real grace under pressure looked like. The remaining hosts sat in various states of shock. Whoopi looked disappointed but not surprised. Sarah was visibly emotional, and Joy Behar sat at the table looking smaller somehow than she had at the beginning of the interview, like someone who had just learned a very difficult lesson about the difference between controversy and cruelty. What had started as a promotional appearance had become something far more profound and significant. A woman who had been singing about strength and survival for 50 years had just demonstrated both in real time on live national television. And she had reminded everyone watching that a life fully lived with all its struggles and triumphs and complications was worth infinitely more than a life spent safely judging others from the sidelines. The aftermath of that interview would dominate entertainment news for weeks. Clips of Chaka's powerful defense of her life and career would be shared millions of times across every social media platform. Her music would see a massive spike in streaming numbers as a new generation discovered the woman behind the voice, the story behind the songs. And somewhere in all that conversation, a question would emerge that was bigger than any single interview. Why do we feel entitled to judge people for the very struggles that made them who they are? But perhaps the most significant outcome was what the confrontation revealed about legacy and what it truly means to be a legend. Chaka Khan had built hers through decades of work, through struggles overcome in songs that touched millions of souls around the world. And when that legacy was challenged by someone who had never created anything comparable, she had defended it with the same fire that had always burned in her legendary voice. Because that's what queens do. They don't just wear the crown. They earn it every single day through every struggle and every triumph. For those who had grown up listening to I'm Every Woman and Ain't Nobody, who had found strength in through the fire during their darkest moments, who had danced to I Feel For You at countless celebrations, there was something deeply satisfying about watching Chaka Khan defend not just her career, but the very idea that a life well lived includes struggles, failures, and the courage to keep going anyway. She had proven once again that the voice that had moved millions was backed by a spirit that refused to be diminished by anyone. What do you think about this incredible confrontation? Was Joy Behar out of line, or was she just doing her job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that will absolutely leave you speechless.